You are listening to the Mohua Show, where it's all about celebrating the Junoon among changemakers and their journey.
So, what does it mean to you personally to see a once invisible woman become everyone's hero?
You have to tolerate, you have to give way. The allies in our lives, the people who see something in us that we ourselves don't see my grandparents as individuals. What kind of man was he, right? I mean, we know he was intelligent. He was definitely controlling, bordering on emotional abuse, if you like. So for me, this started painting a picture of a very narcissistic person. I mean, I know he is my grandfather, but that doesn't mean he can't be narcissistic as well.
There came a point in my life when my patience really turned sour.
So I twisted it, saying if life gives you lemons, you make lemon rice. A daughter openly rebelling, running away from home in India in the 1940s. There's no phone, there's no anything, no GPS, like there's nothing, right? Are we actually willing to hold men to the same high standards that we hold ourselves to? And if you want to move to Bombay, there's no going back for you. And she never saw her parents again. People can take everything away from you. Taken an exam where I've got rejected. I wanted my kids to read. I will recommend not a book, but an author, if you'll allow me, for to be every woman's companion. It is Jane Austen's books that I would wholeheartedly recommend to everyone.
What does it take for an ordinary woman to change the destiny of generations, not through loud rebellion, but through quiet courage? So today's guest with us is Aarti Narayan, who spent 25 years in the corporate world before walking away to tell the story that shaped her own family and her own life. Her debut novel, The Lives She Carried, is inspired by her grandmother, a semi-literate woman from pre-independence Kerala who turned adversity into empowerment and raised 9 children to stand on their own feet. From the train tracks of Travancore to the chawls of Bombay, from PowerPoint slides to the New York Times, this is a story of resilience, reinvention, leadership without titles. You're about to hear about how one woman's silence becomes a legacy and how her granddaughter found her voice in telling the story. Welcome, Aarti. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And I'm always fascinated with women like you. And I'm extremely honored to have you here. So, Aarti, let me just begin by asking you a question. Your debut book begins with Lakshmi, a young girl married at the age of 14 in pre-independence Kerala, who's expected to obey, adjust, and endure. I mean, most of our grandmothers were like that, and also our mothers, you know. But when her husband's actions threaten her children's future, she does something quietly revolutionary. She chooses herself. What does she choose to be a brave mother mean to you beyond the obvious? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Mohua, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm really honored to be here. So, you know, my Pati, Lakshmi, the protagonist of the book, she's a village woman. She doesn't really have any exposure. She doesn't know anything beyond the village. And she is brought up with this attitude that you don't upset the apple cart. In Tamil, there's a phrase called Nidan Vittukudnu. Like, you have to tolerate, you have to give way. You don't question, you don't challenge. And I'm sure we've heard it in every language, not just Indians across the board. And we're talking of a century ago. So for Lakshmi, the first hinge point where she actually decides to do something different is when she sees her teenage daughter married off, without any reference to her, and of course, without any reference to the daughter. Neither of them has any agency in that decision. And it is that makes her want something different for the rest of her kids. She doesn't even know what that something different might actually be. But before that, she has to actually overcome her own demons, right? She has to break this cycle, this generational thing of silence that she's kind of been brought up with. So for me, the first step in her bravery actually starts within her. It's inside her.
Beautiful. I think this is so layered, Aarti, because this whole act of bravery of breaking the silence may not seem very obvious, but it is such a huge battle to overcome. I mean, yeah, and I think it goes on through generations and even now, So just the next question for me would be, where is the exact hinge in Lakshmi's life, when patience, turns into rebellion? Like, I know for sure that there came a point in my life when my patience really turned sour. I couldn't hold on to my patience anymore. So I want to know a little bit about Lakshmi's life.
So, like I said, she grew up in this tiny village called Adur. It's not far from the Tamil Nadu border, but it's in Kerala technically. And, life goes on. Her husband's in Bombay. He's sending these monthly remittances. She's living right next to her parents. And then one fine day, suddenly he shows up, and he would normally visit once a year, right? Leaving her with yet another baby to take care of. And then one fine day he shows up and he says, get the girl ready for marriage. In those days, I guess once you hit puberty, you were kind of marking time till you got married. And my eldest aunt was basically taken off to Trivandrum to be married to whoever. And all my grandfather was worried about was, that he didn't have to pay the marriage expenses. So that was the only thing that mattered to him. And Lakshmi was like pushing her children to be educated and so on. But when she sees that happening, she's like, no, I want them to have a different life from my own, right? I want them to treat a different path from the one I was forced to take. So for me, that is the time that whole decision inside her kind of takes root to do something different. She has no idea what the something different is, to be honest. But she realizes that if she doesn't move, then, it's just going to repeat itself. At some point, someone has to break that cycle.
So inspirational. Wow. So let's talk a little bit about the hidden golden necklace in the story that feels very powerfully symbolic, of agency, inheritance, and risk. So when did that, motive enter your draft, and how did it really shape the plot as as a line of empowerment?
So it's funny, Mohua. What we do know factually is that my party Lakshmi, her sister-in-law, so that's my grandfather's sister, was actually a very rich woman. And she did give her a gold necklace because I guess somewhere in both their minds, they realized that they're not going to see each other, or the chances of them, crossing paths in that lifetime were very slim. So we do know that there was a gold necklace. It was given. What we do not know is what exactly Pati did with it. And maybe she made bangles. Maybe she used it for small things. We don't really know. But then when I was writing this book, I felt that was a great opportunity for me to exercise a bit of artistic license, right? I mean, that's why it's a fiction story based heavily on a true life event. So for me, this gold necklace is actually a metaphor for the allies in our lives, the people who see something in us that we ourselves don't see. Our supporters, our mentors, you call it what you like. And whether it's personal life, whether it's corporate life, you need these people. And so I decided that this gold necklace and its recipient, it's going to be Lakshmi's support, the person who actually propels her through advice, of course, but it also makes things possible for her. So for me, it's a metaphor for someone who's an ally in our life.
Beautiful, Aarti. Because I've never looked at an object actually as as an ally in your life, and I think you're going to make me change my lens towards things, because everything has got a certain reason for it to be in our lives. Beautiful. So let's just talk a little bit about Ramalingam. Lakshmi's husband isn't a caricature. He's destructive, yes, but believable. So how did you write him, through enough complexity to stay true, to the times, without slipping into false redemption? Because I think very few men of that generation ever had any sense of guilt for what they did. Even now, actually, I mean, I may be caught dead for saying this, but that's the truth.
No, you're spot on, Mahua. So, one of the luxuries about writing this book is that I got to see my grandparents as individuals.
Yeah.
Not as my party, not as my tata, but as a young man, a young woman, parents of kids. That was one of the luxuries for me of writing this book. So I tried to think about what might he have been like? What kind of man was he, right? I mean, we know he was intelligent. He was definitely controlling, bordering on emotional abuse, if you like.
All of them. I think so
Yes.
many of them. My God.
Indeed. And he was very self-centered, right? He was the sun, moon, and stars, or he had to be. So for me, this started painting a picture of a very narcissistic person. I mean, I know he is my grandfather, but that doesn't mean he can't be narcissistic as well. And Mahua, if you think about it, if you just close your eyes and think about people of a generation, especially male, you will find that this pattern is not uncommon. I can still point to 10 people and say, hey, you expect the whole world to revolve around you, right? From what sabzi should be cooked in the morning, it'll be, oh, what do you like? I'll make that, right? I'm just simplifying here. So for me, it's like this was such a common pattern. And ironically, till the end of the book, he's actually one of the most educated in from a qualifications perspective. He's a graduate in an India where 3% of the population was literate, right? And to your point about him not having any regrets and not feeling that he's done anything wrong, you're spot on. And the reason he doesn't have a redemption arc is because he himself doesn't think he needs redemption. Redeeming from what? He was just being normal, right?
He was just being,
and exactly, he was just being what he was expected to be. So it was a challenge. And I didn't know him. He died when I was 2, maybe. So it's not like I had any picture per se, except that drawn from his children, who interestingly, not one of his long brood of kids had anything positive to say about him. So I remember asking my mom when I wrote the book and she read the draft, I said, have I been mean? Have I been offensive in any way? Tell me, because I didn't want to offend. And mom says, you have said nothing about him that we haven't said, and much worse. So he doesn't leave a legacy, if you think about it, which is very sad.
It is. So Sarasa Lakshmi's daughter slips into the city at night with her share of the necklace. So how does her vanishing spark the first true fracture in the family? And what does it awaken really in Lakshmi? I mean, this is like, it's a huge act. It's an act of rebellion. So tell me a little bit.
Indeed. So, this is a real thing. And I didn't know till I was in my late teens, early 20s about this, because this was the hush, hush family secret. Well, not secret, but no one talked about it. So on a very superficial level, she ran away. It's disobedience of the highest level, right? A daughter openly rebelling, running away from home in India in the 1940s. There's no phone, there's no anything, no GPS, like there's nothing, right? And of course, you have the whole neighbors are talking, tongues are wagging, they can't even look people in the eye. Mohua, even today, if that happened, you wouldn't be able to look people in the eye. Like it would be this big
Absolutely.
sharam hone wali baat, right? So you can imagine what it must have been. I mean, I can't even imagine in 1944 or 45 what that must have been like. But I think the bigger issue here is no one really empathized, you know what I mean? Because she was running away from a distasteful marriage because she burnt, I would say, to do something more with her life than the typical get married, have kids path. And even her own mom couldn't probably comprehend, Lakshmi couldn't comprehend what drove her to this. I mean, she understood in a way, but such a big act. So no one really empathized with her. And even much later in the 80s and 90s, I would hear my other uncles and aunts saying, hey, because of her, we couldn't look at people for like a whole year. We couldn't look people in the eye. But I think if I put myself in Lakshmi's place, what that really brings home is the fact that if you are going to control people so much, especially a headstrong child, and you take away the power of agency, there will be consequences. And the second thing, I think it really drove home that education isn't enough. You have to be able to stand on your own feet, because no one kills the goose that lays golden eggs, right? Because till that time, she'd been very focused on education. It was still important to her till the end, but now it had to be coupled with financial independence. And I think we don't talk about that as a society. We talk about educate the girls. We don't really talk about let them stand on their own feet. And I think we should talk a bit more about the second.
100%, absolutely. I think, for women, and I just today in the morning, I was thinking about it, Aarti, that it still is such a flex if you found a rich man who's chosen you as, his wife. So your education, none of that is of any significance if you've been able to marry within, your community, within the caste and within the entire structure, even today in India. So, so here you have also spoken about divorce, which enters the story twice, for Bhagyam
Yes.
and for Kamala. How did you approach the tension between tradition and safety without judging these women, or romanticizing their suffering? Because it's a very thin line, to walk on. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, these are my aunts, right? My aunt
Yes.
Kamala is still alive. She's 92. And she was like, use my name. Do not change my name.
Wow.
I've changed most people's names, but not hers. And, in this case, Mohua, I don't think there's a tension between tradition and safety, because in their case, to do the traditional thing is actually to do the safe thing. It's only when they deviate from the path that they're potentially going into uncharted waters, if you like. So in the sense that both of them did something that was not usual for the time, and mind you, the divorces were for reasons that were unfathomable. You know what, you're leaving your husband just because you don't like the lifestyle or whatever. It's not like he had a mistress. It's not something that would be acceptable, if you like, right? But in a way, I think they mirrored their mom, and they were able to shed that emotional baggage of put up with it, don't upset the apple cart. And there's a dialogue where Bhagyam actually tells Lakshmi, I can't take it anymore. Like, I'm going to walk. So I think that represents for me a generational shift. Like, Lakshmi would probably still have put up with it. She was still sending dabba to her husband even after she left the house, right? I know, because my mom was the courier. But in this case, they actually say, no, we can't do it. And for me, this, when I was writing it, I realized, are we actually willing to hold men to the same high standards that we hold ourselves to? Where's the bar for them? And even people in high positions, there's willingness and there's ability. They might be able to do it, but there's the willingness issue. In my book, there's the domestic help of Lakshmi, who's having similar issues with her husband who beats her and drinks and whatnot. Now, she might not be able to, she might be willing to, but in her case, the financial issue is always a bar. So it got me thinking, we don't really hold men. I don't know, everyone has a different viewpoint on that, and I might be committing blasphemy here. But like, do we really hold them to the same bar we set for ourselves?
Not
We
at
say we have to
all.
be perfect. We don't. There's
Not at
something to
all.
ponder over, something to think
Absolutely.
about.
We don't. We so easily
Yes,
excuse them. That word
exactly.
accountability, I don't think really is in the dictionary of many, many educated men. They do not like to be held accountable,
Yeah,
especially by their wives, or their
and we don't
partners.
do it also.
Yeah, yeah, of
But
course,
so,
of
yeah,
course, because we've been trained. Not at all
exactly.
blasphemy. You've spoken the truth and right to my heart. So let's talk a little bit about the title. The title itself, The Life She Carried, suggests both burden and bequest. So what lives did Lakshmi really carry that even her children might have just not seen, that she was taking ahead?
For me, this is such an interesting question, Mohua, because when I was writing the book, like I mentioned with my grandfather, it was such a rich thing. It was such a privilege for me to be able to try and visualize what my party Lakshmi might have been as a young girl, as a young woman, hopes, aspirations, so many things. Because she passed away before I hit my teens. So for me, she was just this gentle, smiling old lady in a madisar, right? I wasn't thinking about all these things. But it's only when I had to pen this that I actually had to force myself to see her as a woman, not as my grandmother. So, I think the biggest thing for her is the leap of faith she took when she left Adur to go to Bombay. She had no idea whether she was jumping from the frying pan to the fire, right? It's dancing in the dark, if you like. So she had no clue. So for me, that was a huge thing, right? Completely, because her exposure was only village life. What did she know what awaited her, good or bad? The other thing is also the sacrifice. I think the children vaguely knew that she never went back to Adur, but they didn't realize that that was a condition imposed by her husband, saying, if you want to move to Bombay, there's no going back for you. And she never saw her parents again, you know, ever. So unless someone came from the village, and her parents were definitely not going to come and visit them in Bombay. So she actually had to make that break. And that was such a huge thing to do without knowing if you're doing it for something good that awaits you. I can't even fathom that kind of thing. And then I got to thinking, as a mom, how much guilt she would have carried for basically, allowing a daughter to be married off without any agency. And it's a different story that it turned out well. But again, she did not know it, right? There was so much, and she was resourceful. She had to do all these things. And it's only now, like I'm sitting here doing this podcast with you, that she's vindicated, right? In every moment that I and my cousins are living and breathing. But she did not know it. And it's funny because my 92-year-old aunt, when she read the book, she told my mom, who is in her late 70s, she said, we never asked Amma, how did she do it? What was she thinking? What was she feeling? How did she kind of just push through? She said, I wish we had asked Amma all these things. So I don't know that I have captured Party's feelings correctly in the book, but I certainly gave it a good shot.
Oh, congratulations.
So, yeah.
You've seen leaders with MBAs and titles, and Lakshmi, a semi-literate woman, led 9 children forward, towards economic independence. So what traits of leadership that she embodies, that even the best business school curriculum just may overlook? And I think this is going to be a very interesting, answer from your side, because it'll help us understand what made women like her, break the rules and walk ahead with empathy.
Yeah, I mean, it is staggering actually when you think of it. I think of people like Patti as steel magnolias, right? They're unassuming, they're gentle, they're the typical granny. Well, I think their spines were made of stainless steel in that generation.
Oh my God, yes.
So I think the first thing is what I just alluded to, the ability to make decisions without complete information, without much information, like a lot of ambiguity to deal with. The willingness to actually sacrifice. So it's a lot of short-term pain for hopefully long-term gain, but you'll never know it until the very end. I think she was in many ways a pioneer, at least in my family, right? That she broke that mold and did something different. She was also very resourceful. She was always looking out for opportunities, right? Whether it was the girls learning Hindi, and mind you, that would have been a big shift when all you've spoken has been Tamil and Malayalam, right? From that to basically going to the teacher, seeing if there's a scholarship to be had for her daughter because there's no money for fees. In so many ways, it's a lot of resourcefulness, right? Right down to the simple meals that she was able to conjure, right? I mean, Pati's Tair Chadam is kind of legendary in my family. So I think a lot of leadership qualities were displayed by her. And of course, staff development, right? She made sure all her children were educated.
Wow. Wow. So
Yeah.
the story closes with Lakshmi's granddaughter earning her degree, a symbol of everything that Lakshmi fought for. So what does that moment really represent to you personally? Is it closure, redemption, or a quiet victory for all the women who came before?
So, this is, of course, very personal for me, right? Because where Pati's story technically stops is where my story starts, because I'm the granddaughter, right, in the book. And, when I was getting my MBA and in all the years leading up to it, my mom used to just tell me one thing. She said, Pati always used to say, people can take everything away from you, your riches, your goods, your name, even your pride and dignity if they try hard enough, but they can never take your education away from you. I grew up with that. And it's interesting, even my teenage kids don't argue with that when I repeat this statement to them. So I think it represents 2-3 things for me, Mohua. One is an absolute vindication that Pati did the right thing, right? I mean, that is clear as day. The second thing is, whatever talent God's given us, we have to make the most of it. You can't afford to waste that. We talk about don't waste food, don't waste money, but don't waste your talent. I was pushed every minute of every day by Lakshmi's daughters, all of them, my mother and my aunts, and I'm grateful for it. And finally, I think whether a person, whether it's a society, whether it's a nation, we are where we are because of the people who came before us. So I think we owe it to ourselves to do the right thing so that the people coming after us benefit from it. So that would be my big takeaway from it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Absolutely. Paving the way forward, the path
Fingers
forward.
crossed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So readers have really called your party a stoic philosopher in a sari, a superhero who, led without seeking the spotlight. Amazing, and said that they binge read her story through tears and smiles. So what does it mean to you personally to see a once invisible woman become everyone's hero? What does it feel?
Oh, I'm so glad you're asking me this, because for me, this was the most meaningful question in the entire, in the entire thing. I think I started writing this story actually to document Pati's story for my kids. I'd come across a phrase by Maya Angelou, I think, saying, if you don't know where you've come from, how do you know where you're going? So I think it was really important for me to connect them to their roots. And that's why I started writing it, and it evolved into a book. But it's funny, when I had people read the initial drafts, they actually started SMSing me, emailing me, saying, oh, this reminds me of my nani, this reminds me of my dadi, my great aunt, my whoever. And some men also, they reminded them of maybe their granddad or so on. But for the most part, those stories would be well known. The female ones were a bit more under the radar. So people were delighted, and I would get these SMSs from a lot of friends and loved ones. And then I said, I am going to dedicate it to all the unsung women who have toiled to shape their family's story. That could be your granny, that could be the domestic help who's toiling in your house, whoever it is. It's not just my family. I'm writing it for those people who either don't know their stories or can't write a book or whatever reason. I mean, these women are never going to win, a Paramveer Chakra or a Victoria Cross for valor. But that doesn't make their bravery any less deserving, right? If not more so, because they're doing it silently.
Totally agree with you. Yeah. You've written about the moment when conviction turned into doubt, when imposter syndrome whispered, who are you to write a book? And how reading Indian classics like Pinjar and Ek Chadar Maili Si, and how did you find your voice, again? So how did all these women, like Paro, Rano, Puro, teach you about courage, endurance, and how did that lemon rice moment turn your fear into fuel for storytelling? I need to know about this lemon rice moment.
Well, you know how people say, if life gives you lemon, you make lemons, make
Lemonade.
lemonade. So I twisted it, saying, if life gives you lemons, you make lemon rice, because I'm Tamil, right? That's what I would say. But jokes aside, I'd always been a voracious reader, but it never entered my head that I would ever write a book. I was just happy reading. And the only thing I wrote for 25 years were business papers and strategy presentations. So this whole idea of writing, I started documenting it, like I said, not in a book form. And then suddenly I'm like, really, do you think you have the chops to do this? Like, what makes you think? You know how it is. There's always the devil sitting on your shoulder. And so I did what I always do when I'm in doubt. I go and read. Except this time I decided, this was my last 12 months have been my year of reading Indian classics. So I read all these things that I'd seen in movies, but never read. Devdas. I read Ek Chadar Maili Si. I read, Pinjar. And whether it's Paro or Ranno or Puro, I realized that all these women are victim of circumstances. They didn't have agency. It was like, put up with it, right? But somewhere along the way, they managed to find their voice, each in a different way. And then I realized that the woman I was trying to write about was also, in her own way, a victim of circumstances, but that she also managed to find her voice along the way. And that kind of gave me a bit of courage, if you like. And then when I sent the first draft to a couple of trusted friends, one person said he was moved to tears and he couldn't get beyond the prologue. Someone else said it's a page turner, it's evocative. And the third person said I transported them right back to the coconut fields. So I'm human. I need external validation just as
We all
much
do.
as the next person, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me courage. And yeah, that's my lemon rice moment, if you like.
Wonderful. So your journey from rejections and ghosting to being published in the New York Times, I mean, come on, that's a dream. Sounds like a perfect plot twist. So how did that moment really reshape your confidence as a debut author? And what did it teach you, Aarti, about timing, perseverance, and trusting the process, which is so tough to trust the process.
It is
Very
tough.
tough.
It is tough. Mohua, I don't think I've ever done anything or applied for any job or taken an exam where I've got rejected. By the grace of God. Not boasting, it is what it is. So
I
I
hear
think
you.
this was my year to get the rejections of the last 50 years all came at one go.
Yeah.
Worse than the rejections, because the people who rejected me were kind. They said, we love it, but for yada, yada, yada. I mean, whether they were kind or not, they didn't sound nasty. But the ghostings, oh my God, the ghostings, that was the worst part. And, it was at one point, I'm like, I'm going to give up. I'm going to self publish, chuck all this nonsense. But then I realized that the irony of writing about a woman whose main quality was resilience, the least I could do was to show some resilience myself. So I kind of picked myself up, dusted myself off, and then randomly one Sunday evening, I sent off something to the New York Times. It was this tiny love stories, 100-word essays in their modern love section. Within 72 hours, I get an email, and I thought it was a prank email to start with, saying, oh, you're getting published. And I'm like, okay, whatever else happens, I'll always have the NYT. I'm a big Casablanca fan. So yes, we'll always have Paris. NYT. And this happened in back-to-back weeks. And it's, again, that same external validation that I was talking about. So I'm like, okay, let's, plod on a bit, see if I can find someone. And then, as luck would have it, a friend of a friend recommended this award-winning UK small press called Author and Me, based in Buckinghamshire. And they loved the story. In fact, one of the publishers was like, oh, this reminds me of my grandmother. So it was kind of a bit of click there. And, yeah, God bless the NYT is all I'll say. And just 10 days ago, I had a hat trick. I had a third tiny love story published with a Diwali theme. So it's all
Oh,
good.
lovely. Fantastic. You joked that debut authors need the hide of a rhino, and I'm completely in agreement with you. And here you are, co-authoring a humorous, tongue-in-cheek second book, right? So what was it like to shift gears, from emotional legacy to laughter, lightness, and humor as a new genre?
Yeah, absolute hide of rhino. I've got layers and layers.
Who am I?
But indeed, I don't have to tell you, Mohua, you know this. If this book, The Lives She Carried, is the book that I had to write because I wanted to give Patti her time in the sun, the book I'm co-authoring now is the book I think I was born to write. It's meant to be a funny, humorous, tongue-in-cheek, almost Woodhouseian take. And I'm co-authoring with a very dear friend, and we have the best time writing it. We are laughing all the time. So like I said, we're having a great time doing this. So I'm hoping that whoever picks it up will have as much time reading it as we've had writing it. And a couple of years ago, when I edited my B School Silver Reunion yearbook, I had to write funny write-ups on people. And I had a bit of encouragement from my batchmates who said, hey, you should write something funny. So I've taken them up on it, and they have only themselves to blame. What do they say? Be careful what you ask for. You might actually get it. But seriously, I think in this world, a bit of humor is not a bad thing.
It's a great thing. It's a great thing. So I was really moved by a family reading time post, So 4 people, 1 room, no screens, just books. It's such a simple image, yet it's so powerful, So do you think habits like these, the sight of, parents reading, because I grew up with watching both my parents reading all the time. My father was always reading. So are these really the foundation of storytelling and empathy in the next generation?
At one level, we all have a backstory, right? Whether it's your family, whether it's you everyone's got a story. It's just a question of whether people peel back the layers to find out what it is. But I believe in a few things. As a voracious reader, I wanted my kids to read. And books stoke imagination like nothing else does. I think just yesterday I read a quote from Einstein, saying with logic you can get from A to B, I think, and then he says with imagination you can go anywhere. And fiction for me is king, right? You can live, you can die, you can laugh, you can cry, you can do all of that within the pages of a book, right? And so we wanted our kids to actually partake of that wonder. It was a great time to actually bond with them. I mean, I had my 3-year-old, my 7-year-old at the time. We'd all just be in my bedroom and we'd all be reading. And sometimes they will ask, what does this mean? Or what is this? And it's a great way to actually get them to open up. I mean, kids at that age do open up, but if you don't start young, you can't suddenly expect them to open up to you when they are teens. And I'm loving the whole full circle thing. So when I was younger, my aunt would be telling me stories, and I still remember her crying when she was telling me Tale of Two Cities. And yesterday, my daughter was practically in tears when she was reading it. So I kind of feel like the wheel has come full circle.
Yeah.
But it's just great time spent with the kids.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. I remember reading Aarti Narayan, which is written by Bibhuti Bandopadhyay with my mother as a young girl, as a very, very young child. And that book still remains, in the deepest part of my heart. It is such a beautiful story. So I totally relate to what you're saying. And now, if you could place just one book, in the hands of every woman, young or old, as a companion or compass, so which book would it be, and why do you think it still speaks to women navigating life today, in today's time and age?
Okay, so Mohua, I don't know that I'm equipped to recommend a compass for women because no, but every woman marches to a different drummer, right? So what I think might suit someone, who knows, that person might or might not agree with it. But I will recommend not a book, but an author, if you'll allow me, to be every woman's companion. In the 250th year of anniversary of her birth, it is Jane Austen's books that I would wholeheartedly recommend to everyone, because I think you need to go to a female writer to get realistic portrayals of women, right? I feel like the ones the men do are either too good to be true or too evil to be believed. It's like extremes. That's just me. But I think within Austen's books, you will find a heroine for every personality, whether you're feisty, whether you're headstrong, whether you're meek, or whether you're naive. You will find someone for everyone, and you'll find a book for every mood. So, and the prose is sparkling, the dialogues are witty. It's a perfect intersection of what I call writing, the art of writing, and the art of storytelling. What's not to like? So yeah, everyone, pick up Jane Austen.
Let's read all over again about Darcy.
Yes, why not?
So if you had to design an IM case study, based on her life, what would be its key takeaways?
Oh my God. My imagination is boggling at this question. But Mohua, we had a course when I was at IMA that a lot of people dissed, saying, what is this? It's just a lot of talk and no action. There's no numbers. There's no anything. But that one, I think, has served most people as we navigated corporate careers. It's called organizational behavior, where you really delve into people's motivations, thinking, and so on. And so if I designed a course based on this book, it would be under that particular organizational behavior course. Probably have a headstrong CEO and a deputy CEO or a COO force to run the place to save the sinking ship. I would basically have the takeaways be, don't be afraid to take tough decisions. The decisions need to be timely decisions. Be resourceful. Yeah. Don't leave opportunities on the table. Don't leave money on the table. And importantly, figure out how to influence without the direct use of authority. That's critical. And focus on your teams. Focus on the people working for you. Make sure you develop them. because they are the people ultimately who are going to deliver for you. You only have 7 days a week, 24 hours in a day. You can't do it all. So if that were me, I would design this kind of course. But above all, I would say all your actions have to be tuned with the objective of your long-term corporate legacy, your long-term legacy. Short-term pain, yes, but long-term gain, that's the main thing. Because how do you want to be remembered, right? I think if everyone lives their lives with this kind of thing in mind, then I think that's going to shape our actions, inform our actions in a very different way than if you don't think about it. So how do you want people to remember you?
Wonderful. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. And just for all our listeners, Aarti Narayan's The Life She Carried reminds us that sometimes the greatest revolutions happen in silence, in kitchens, in classrooms, in the steady gaze of a mother who refuses to give up. Her story and her parties is a testament that leadership doesn't always wear a title and courage always doesn't make noise. So thank you, Aarti, for reminding us that the path less trodden is often the one that leads us home. And for all of you who's listening to this podcast, Aarti's books are available on Amazon India and Amazon UK. So go pick up the copy and let's follow all the resilience that Party teaches us. Thank you for writing this book. And thank you for bringing her story forward, Aarti. It, I think, is extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohua. Thank you for having me on the show. I hope people read the book. I hope they like it. And most important, I hope it reminds them of someone in their life who shaped their family's story.
Thank you.